Harley Quinn, the first named sidekick of the Joker, and the only one that really stuck. And that's probably because in the end, she was just better than him. Harleen Quinzel was a promising student of psychiatry, with a particular interest in the psychology of violent criminals. And this interest only intensified when Guy Kopsky, a fellow student and her boyfriend at the time, killed another man and then ended up dead himself. In some tellings of these events, Guy was having schizo delusions and thought that he was protecting Harleen. In others, he thought that this was the ultimate gesture to prove his love to her. And in still another, Harleen manipulated him into doing it out of her intense curiosity for the psychology of extreme mental states. But whatever the truth of it actually is, it only intensified Harleen's interest in these states and their often criminal expressions. So when she finished her schooling, Harleen went to work at Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane, and in particular, she specifically sought some one-on-one time with the Joker, despite being warned that she was not ready for him. She saw him as the ultimate challenge, but that quickly extended into her seeing him as the ultimate bad boy for her to fix. But the Joker was able to read her at least as well as she read him and pull her strings. This is partly because of his manic nature and wealth of experience manipulating others, and also partly because, I think, she was drawn to the kind of life that he represented, the freedom to let go and just laugh at life and society. Soon enough, Harleen was completely sold, and she took on her new persona as she busted Joker out, complete with her classic Harley Quinn outfit, and right away she displays extreme talent for this new lifestyle, being able to pull off a disguise, diverting the guards, and precise use of explosives to break her pudding out of jail without turning them both into pudding. And in many versions of her story, soon after, she agrees to be baptized in an acid vat, or maybe she gets pushed in against her will, just like the event that originally created the Joker, bleaching her skin white as well as her brain, affecting her behavior from that point forward. She becomes more criminally impulsive and has a carefree attitude towards even incredibly dangerous situations.
I might not be in the mood to deal with white shenanigans that day.
In other versions, it is just makeup and Mr. J's brainwashing abilities. And this could be considered Harley's first real buff in her abilities. Getting her brain bleached, or just being sucked into the Joker's way of thinking, allows Harley to fight without hesitation, and with a playful but calm mind. It makes her hard to trap or catch slipping, and frees up her creativity. Normal people have to take extensive measures to function well out of the kind of extreme scenarios that Harley often finds herself in. The adrenaline dump causes tunnel vision and a tendency towards lizard brain type responses. Without training, such as doing countless drills for different scenarios to create pre-programmed actions, many will fail to adapt under this stress and end up losing track of their objectives, will panic and commit acts of friendly fire or drop their weapons, and will be so inflexible as to freeze up when circumstances change from what they were specifically prepared for. Even Batman relies on extensive training as a foundation, but Harley just doesn't have these problems. She is lucid and laughing, and it gives her an edge against most normal combatants. And she didn't really need time to acclimatize at all to her new lifestyle. In fact, she pulled off a technical heist to break Joker out of his Hannibal Lecter cell before even receiving this buff, and combine this lucidity with Harley's athletic background as a gymnast, and she is even more unpredictable and slippery in a fight. She has a habit of catching her opponents off guard by constantly changing her tactics and using the environment to an extent that at times borders on the Toon Force. And using her training in psychology, she is good at reading people and knowing what buttons to push to keep them off balance, such as by bringing up their fears and insecurities to make them more emotional during a fight, or to play into the way things look and making herself seem a lot more helpless than she actually is as a way to set traps. And Harley is also very well conditioned and possessing of a high pain tolerance. She has surprisingly high physical durability, especially for her build, being able to shrug off impacts that would incapacitate most normal humans. For example, she has the ability to take the impact of falling from great heights, and unlike someone with extensive acrobatics training like some of the Robins, early in Harley's career she doesn't tend to land very gracefully when being knocked around. But even when she takes a very bad fall, including bad lacerations, her recovery time is generally brief. Now here's the thing about women and psychopathic or dark triad men. A lot of women are drawn to these sorts of men because they feel that whoever stands in his way won't cuck or enslave him, but instead will get thrown on a fire for his progress. Oftentimes these men will be abusive in some way, but the dark triad potential they see in these guys just gets these women excited. For the Joker, however, the fire of burning bodies often is this idea of progress. And the funny thing about Harley and Joker's romance and crime partnership is that in a lot of ways, she is just better than him. Harley is the more capable physical combatant, while the Joker relies more on misdirection and manipulation, and even prep time, just like Batman. Harley had studied the Joker in preparation for their meetings back in Arkham, but he was well informed and prepared for her, so he was still able to outmaneuver her defenses and turn her into his little codependent tool of chaos.
How about another joke, Jimmy? What do you get when you mix a codependent girl with an obsession for violent criminals? With a bad boy murdering clown who abandons her and treats her like trash, you get fucking served dessert.
and by dominating her psychologically, the Joker can get in physical shots that go undefended. He just put all the strings that he could pull on her down to a science, and he also knew that despite setting herself free from society's codes, Harley was still unsure about her ability to make it on her own and live a good life outside of the system. In a straight fight though, and giving the Joker no prep time or codependence, Harley would, and has, smashed the Joker. She would break his funny bone and deflower him of all his tricks. You see, gymnasts and other people who are serious about agility in general are actually very strong to be that mobile. Moving around quickly means, accelerating your entire body mass over and over again. Sometimes with one leg, sometimes with one arm. That's why Harley has such a noticeably strong core, because the core is essential to controlling your center of mass, especially when transferring a lot of force through your body to move around in different directions. And this force transfer, which boxers call kinetic linking, can be used for offense as well. And Harley uses a lot of different tools and weapons, some of which are just gag items, which add to her chaotic and unpredictable image. But her most iconic weapon is a giant mallet, like what you might find at a circus for test of strength events, but larger. And some of these are also gag props, but most of Harley's hammers are completely solid and real, but she still swings them around like they're mostly made of air. Harley has the strength and coordination to swing around what must be at least a 50-pound hammer, despite her petite frame. Even a 20-pound hammer is hard for a moderately fit person to swing around with any kind of grace, and it becomes exhausting quickly, even with good technique. To put this kind of strength another way, with the kind of force and grip strength she puts into this hammer, Harley could rip a man's arm clean off, or just swing him around to pulverize his allies. The fact that she uses a hammer is a mercy compared to what she could do with her bare hands. But again, for a good while, the Joker would always win because Harley was his tool, and even when she began trying to leave, they would always end up back together with the slightest of smooth talk from Mr. J, because she so desperately wanted to believe it's meant to be. And I mean, after committing all these crimes, she might be a little susceptible to the sunken cost fallacy. They were just that chaotic, dysfunctional couple that occasionally tries to kill one another, and that was the status quo until during one particularly rough patch, Harley became super besties with Poison Ivy. Ivy gave Harley the confidence that she indeed can make a life without her precious Mr. J, and she started moving in that direction. She also let Quinn taste a fresh helping of her sweet plant lady nectar, and this granted Harley an all-around buff to her strength, speed, durability, stamina, longevity, so she can stay a porcelain clown doll for decades to come. And she also granted Harley an immunity to many toxins, which is beneficial when going against someone like the Joker, who is a liberal user of deadly poisons when the mood strikes him. These buffs bring Harley up to being able to physically hold her own against Batman level opponents. However, against the B-Man himself, Harley is capable of getting the jump on him with her more chaotic approach, but she just isn't really vicious enough to capitalize on it before the B-Man starts to dominate her with his strategic mind and more formal training. Harley does enjoy mayhem, but she just isn't as murdery as the Joker, especially once he is no longer exerting his influence over her. As an example of this difference, Harley continues to apply the knowledge of poisons that she learned from the Joker, but her version of the Joker venom is only potent enough to incapacitate and not kill. The chaos is there, that's Harley, but just not so much the sadism or desire to spread nihilism, and she is more impulsive rather than trying to accomplish elaborate masterpiece sorts of crimes, meaning she doesn't need to just eliminate bystanders who happen to be standing in the way of her plans. Unlike the Joker, she isn't followed by the horror of the fridge logic to her schemes. So, with this buff coming from her time spent vine swinging with her new bestie Poison Ivy, Harley's new physical feats include jumping to at least several times her own height, and she can jump across entire streets now, not just alleyways. She can jump off of a high-rise balcony, get shot on the way down and live. And even jumping out of an aircraft with no parachute is kind of just a gag for her. And this is kind of a side note, but if Harley ever has any operational need to get more lift than she can do with just her body, she has access to a rocket pogo stick and a jetpack. And the jetpack is really just a rocket, which is not exactly safe for a normal person, but Harley has a long history of being almost completely immune to nearby explosions, with the Joker often not accounting for her personal safety in his schemes. Very rarely is there any kind of even superficial shrapnel damage, as she never bursts her eardrums. Harley's agility and reactions are the traits most noticeably improved by this buff. Weaving through gunfire at close range is now just something that she has to remember to do, or she'll get shot again and have to wait a few days to heal. And there is some evidence to suggest that she is able to actually see and react to bullets in flight when fired at long long range, a feat which has been observed in some birds but never regular humans, who at most can react to a distant muzzle flash if they are mentally primed for it. And even at a low estimate, modern Harley is mentally and physically about 3 steps ahead of the average trained soldier, being able to charge directly into automatic fire without being hit and taking them out with spear. She has the pinpoint accuracy and timing to handily win firefights against multiple men wearing helmets and flak jackets. So in the main timelines, Harley finally realized that the Joker was just too far gone for her to have a real future with, and no amount of devotion and putting up with abuse was ever going to fix that. The thing about her choosing the Joker is that he didn't just do it for her. She did everything for him, and that kind of devotion doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's probably more nature than it is nurture, and that is something to keep in mind, and actually give her a few points for. Like, Batman isn't known for his humor, but maybe if he was, he could have caught her interest as a sidekick, and maybe then he wouldn't have resorted to recruiting child soldiers to fight the Mafia. In fact, even the Joker probably got more mileage of enjoyment out of the sadism of capturing and torturing Jason Todd or killing Batgirl than he did from working with, dating, and also abusing Harley. He was especially irked and violent whenever she started to steal his thunder with her own schemes, and he regularly turned her down at times when she wanted to get frisky. Joker really only had eyes for Batman, and compared to him, Harley was completely disposable, but such is her nature that she kept putting attempts to make it work over everything else. So anyways, Harley from this point forward ends up in a few different groups, and she tends to be the most prominent member when she's involved, taking on a more edgy Alice in Wonderland, lollipop chainsaw, sucker punch kind of aesthetic. And sometimes she wears this daddy's little monster get up and gets it tattooed as well for redundancy's sake. And she also gets custom clothing with her name all over it. Basically, she gets a little experimental, but she's still thinking about her brand, you know? Action figures. And she now has a second iconic weapon, the baseball bat, good for making lazy puns about Batman. And while her giant mallet is arguably a better shock weapon for breaking through the defenses of peak and meta humans, the bat is a comparatively more surgical weapon and tool for getting entangled with goons. It also seems more in line with their New York accent and a step away from the circus performer flashiness. And this brings me to Harley's strongest natural attribute. The Joker may have loosened her up some, both morally and anti-socially. And by the way, his preferred method of brainwashing people appears to be through torture. But the truth is that Harley already had most of what she became inside of her. Joker just gave her the clown theme and a semblance of direction. You see, what the Joker represents, in most renditions anyways, not just the first Joaquin Phoenix one, is the beaten down man who eventually cast away his morals and ended his attempts to find a rewarding role in society or even in the underworld, and instead has turned to violent mockery, desiring to expose the comedy of it all. Morals, after all, are a code that we generally follow for evolved social acceptability reasons. As a man, if you don't follow any kind of code, then people aren't going to want to cooperate with you because they come to expect chaos and betrayal. Joker embraces being an agent of chaos, and he gets by on pure violence and intimidation, rather than a spirit of true cooperation. He would see someone's moral code as a source of pleasure as he pushes their buttons to make them break it, such as in his frequent attempts to make Batman break his code of no killing. Harley Quinn, on the other hand, as a female, doesn't really need to follow a moral code to survive, as long as men want to fuck her. Evolutionarily speaking, young women have always had their fertility to offer first and foremost, and so they were culled less for failures to follow a moral code, and thus it just doesn't exist within them as strongly as it does for men. So for Harley, the choice of the man she wants to be with doesn't necessarily revolve around what you might call good and evil. Her professional interest in men who exist in extreme mental states clearly ties in with her personal interest, but I sincerely think that if Batman, for example, would break his code just once and kill a bad guy, just because of her history of having killing associated with romantic gestures, and then be like, I did it for you, Harley, that she would drop the Joker and be all over him and dressing in the same gothic supernatural predator theme, the Halloween Queen. Batman ticks the boxes for an extreme mental state. If you want to try and tell me that as the nemesis of the Joker, Batman is the image of sanity and would bore Harley to death, consider the following. Take a close look at the characters that Bruce chooses to go after. It's all white guys. Batman wanted to take revenge on white people, all because that one guy who killed his parents was white. I mean, hey, just because one white guy killed your whole family doesn't mean that it's reasonable that you should team up with a black guy to take revenge on white people. Just look at the rogues gallery of white people that Batman has fucked up. He doesn't kill them, and he doesn't let them go to real prison. He just fucking savages them over and over. And the more brain damage he hands out, the less chance that they have at rehabilitation. And this is supposed to be Gotham's champion of sanity and morality. In fact, who is to say that he didn't create some of Gotham's worst villains just by fucking up white people over and over? The Joker was a low-level thug before Batman came after him. And on some level, Harley is right to try and defend the J-Man, because the B-Man doesn't want rehabilitation, he wants problems. So Harley allows herself to be bent somewhat into the image of the man she chooses, and can even become codependent. But it is not a contradiction to say that Harley, on a certain level, has very strong mental fortitude. Any normal person would not be able to psychologically endure the lifestyle that she is living. They would be under intense stress with all the fists and firefights going on, and no foreseeable relief in the future. And unlike, say, a tour of duty or a gang war, where the shock gets dulled as something of a routine sets in, her life is cartoonishly chaotic. They would have so much cortisol build up in their bodies that they would age 10 years in 6 months. And that's if they don't just drop dead foaming at the mouth first. But that's clearly not happening to Harley. No matter what happens to her, she always bounces back to her cheerful, somewhat childish demeanor. Everyone and their mother wants to talk about their trauma these days and how it has held them back from making the most of their life. But not Harley. Her problem is her interest in the psychological extreme.
You can't deny there's an element of glamour to these super criminals.
And her willingness to go all in on a relationship. But she was never truly broken, never purely the victim. Sometimes, when you're feeling down, you gotta ask yourself, am I chemically depressed, or am I just too fucking useless to believe I could ever thrive? Not Harley though. For her, that is not the question. She just perks up after 5 minutes of exaggerated moping and asks what's next. She can take a beating from Batman and get slapped around and verbally abused by the Joker for outshining him in the same day and just not really be affected. Maybe she and the Joker represent a certain type of toxic relationship, but Harley is not really that girl.
Maybe you're a better crook than the rest of us put together.
Maybe? Nah.
She was never really afraid or going through battered wife syndrome. In fact, she was probably thinking that he hits like a bitch. It's just that she wanted to wear his jersey, so to speak, but she couldn't accept what it was really all about. So during her time with the Suicide Squad, Harley tries to form a new relationship with the assassin for hire Deadshot, but he turns out to be not the kind of man that she expected. She thought that he would be a thug max sociopath that treats her like garbage, but when he treated her decent and made himself clear that he only wanted a casual thing, she was dumbstruck. She might be mentally strong, but she was a little accustomed to a certain pattern. Like, he's a criminal, but he's also a professional, Harley. Now, before I wrap this up, I should mention that the Joker has also been matched with something of a replacement. Punchline is a college girl who became infatuated with the Joker after a chance encounter. She is similar to Harley in the way that she fights, except that she does have a preference for blades and poisons. She is much more naturally vicious than Harley, and for her the clown imagery is just a veneer. And actually, Punchline did manage to kill Harley by slashing her throat when they fought, but she survived. And undeterred by nearly dying, Harley sought a rematch and beat Punchline down in her playful but still brutal manner without being caught by Punchline's viciousness the second time around. She beat the Joker's more demonic clown-leading protege, using all the things she acquired outside of her former relationship. But of course, I know the real difference that you notice between the girls immediately is that Punchline has long, luxurious hair, and even without wearing anything particularly revealing, it is clear that she has assets to spare, while Harley has her hair in pigtails and is more childlike in appearance and personality. I mean, it plays into her former codependence and carefree clownish style, and such a body is also more advantageous for a nimble gymnast and for being shot out of a cannon if that ever comes up. You know, she's fun-sized. Punchline has that combo of a sultry body leading into a vicious personality, but despite her moniker, it just doesn't feel like she is in it for the joke. The story behind her name is that she wants to make a mockery of the adults around her, always saying that she can be whoever she wants to be, by choosing to be a nihilistic killer for fun. Like, literally, the punchline is that encouraging her to make her own choices can lead to her being a serial killer. It's not even something moderately deep, like how actually this world is chaotic and full of hardship and barriers that can keep you from the things that you want and push you down different paths. Even the Joker had a lot of harsh life experience before developing his current outlook. He has this whole thing about one bad day, which I don't think Punchline would even get. Instead, she just laughs, cause she's fangirling and she likes killing. See, there is a certain type of hot college girl who uses her looks to destroy lives for fun. It's one of those things that can happen the first time parental supervision is really lifted, and Punchline just seems to be a more violent extension of that type. Punchline is also one of those girls who refers to her significant other as her partner, leaving it unclear as to whether they have a thing or not at all. Her and the Joker do, as far as I can tell, but she still chooses to say partner. You know, in my life, I know 2 women who have referred to their boyfriend girlfriends as partner, and 0 guys who do. And online, it's the same story, it's mostly females that do that. And yeah, I know that it's a forced trend to say partner to ostensibly appear inclusive of gays and whatnot. But really, I think most women that say partner do so as a way to diminish the relationship while they continue to look around at their options. While most men will choose to say girlfriend, to flaunt the fact that they do in fact have a girlfriend. And Harley says pudding, because she can't contain her soft and melty feelings. Another aspect of this is that Punchline is eager to point out that she is on the same level as the Joker, while Harley was actually superior to the Joker in almost every way besides experience. But she was comfortable taking the sidekick role while also tiptoeing around his ego as a comedian, and getting smacked around now and then anyways, and abandoned during getaways or just left for dead. And say what you want about that, but Harley was actually in it for the relationship, and instead of immediately having an ego about comparing herself with the Joker like Punchline does, Harley was more invested in reversing the damage that Batman has done to the Joker so that they can live something of a happy, healthy life together. And when she finally realized that all of her training and therapy can't do anything for him, she gradually drifted off to find new sources of excitement and mayhem, and just maybe a new man. Now, just before I get to my final ratings, there are a few timelines in which Harley receives training from the Amazons on the island of Themyscira. She finally receives some formal combat training after all this time, and from a race of metahuman female warriors who have lived for thousands of years. So they would have rubbed off on her to always be thinking 10 steps ahead in a fight and to always strike true. But technically, this didn't happen in the main DC timeline, so it's kinda whatever. It's really more of a plot device to include her in stories involving higher tier characters, which at least speaks to her popularity. So here's my stats for Harley. Just hit pause if you need an explanation. Strength 6, Speed 8, Durability 7, Endurance 8, Adaptability 7, Strategy 6, Willpower 7, Style 6, and Sexiness 1S. So thanks for watching, be sure to check out my Discord, and remember the sad truth of comedy. You're always gonna take shots from people who just don't get the joke, and the not so sad truth is that you're always getting material from them too.